So welcome everybody. This is our April 15th meeting, and we are called to order at 6:16. First order of business, any adjustments to the agenda? Elizabeth.
My apologies, I just put some of this delicious food in my mouth. I am wondering if we can make...
Your mic's not on.
Is it on now?
Yes.
There we go, okay. I'm wondering if we can make an adjustment to the agenda to include a review of the CALA Select Board letter that we received this evening.
We can add it into, the motion is to add it into the board operations, but there is no action that can be taken because it hasn't been warned, but
Yeah.
But the
Thank you.
discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do I need to say something different? I move to...
I think you're requesting it to be added, and then we'll make a motion to accept the adjusted agenda.
Okie dokie, thank you.
Are there any other additions or changes to the agenda? And I just was noticing, I know Julia is online, and I think that's the only board member online. So is there a motion to accept the adjusted agenda?
So moved.
Ursula moved.
Second.
Seconded by Chris. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So order. So we welcome those who are with us both online and in person here. And we are at the public comments section. And so if people could raise their hands both online and here as to if you would like to make a public comment, so that then we can take a look at our time and the amount of time needed for. If there are many people, we'll keep it at 1.5 minutes. If there's not as many, we'll adjust the time. I'm looking online. I'll give a minute just to make sure. Anyone in person here? Okay, and I am not seeing any online. I'm just double checking because my screen's a little, okay. All right, so we will move on. There is still public comments at the end of the meeting as well. So we will move on to the reports. The first is superintendent and Colt reports.
Yep, so, this one, all right. So just to highlight, I put in a very brief, just kind of update of some of the legislative things that are happening. I can tell you that in the time from when I wrote that until now, it's already changed. I would highly encourage the board and the community to stay apprised of what's happening in the legislature right now, particularly around these three large areas. But there are a whole lot of small things that are happening in education as well. Well, I say small, they'll all have impact, but really, I just want to make sure that the board, when you're getting your VSBA weekly updates, really take a moment, because it is changing on a daily basis. I get updates every Monday from the VSA as well, and so Act 73 has already been, I think Ways and Means already made some changes to it today, if it was. So there's a lot happening with how they're adjusting Act 73 around the implementation time period, removing maps as a necessary requirement for them to move forward with foundation formula, which is that second piece on there. I think we are going to probably need an entire board meeting once we get through this legislative session to just debrief what all the effects could be of this legislative session. So I just kind of, there's our foreshadowing. Hopefully that is not ominous foreshadowing, but I can tell you that the bill that I am keeping the closest eye on right now is not the Act 73, because that has a further timeline, but the S220 and the spending controls. That is the one that could most directly affect our work next year in budgeting. By reducing the amount of money that is allowed under the threshold. So right now, the threshold is set as 118% of a figure that they come up with. You'll recall that we only were $90 per pupil under that threshold. That threshold could come down from 118% as low as 112%, which would be a significant change in where we sit in relationship to the threshold. We would be well over the threshold in that case. So I do not know, like, this is one of those things, I can't predict anything in this legislature right now. This is one, though, that I'm keeping an eye on because it will directly affect us in a hurry. So that's what those pieces are there. And Suzanne's here if you have any questions about what's going on in finance. So there's a lot of pieces there, and I just wondered if there were any questions that that anybody had around that.
I have one. Oops. I have one that maybe is connected to finance. I was just wondering what the fund balance is, what the amount is.
Yeah, Suzanne, you want to?
Let me get my paper out.
Yeah, and so.
While I'm looking for that though, I did want to highlight about Bill.
Oh, yes, we do need a big shout out to one of you. Marty, it's also included in when we send out the finance committee packet.
Okay.
So it's, and as a new guy, right?
Yeah.
So we make sure that everybody gets the packet. I hope everybody got the finance committee packet and the board. So that presentation was there as well, but we can certainly.
Yeah, to answer the question first, we started the year with $3,781,476 in the fund balance. $357,000 of that is reserved for technology equipment, future purchases, and $309,000 is reserved for fiscal software and related costs for future purchases. Total beginning fund balance available for operations after those reserves is $3,114,548. The projected net change in the fund balance this year after the capital transfer that the board approved a few weeks ago is a reduction of $531,648. So we're projecting $2,582,900 for the end of the year. And one of the things that the finance committee highlighted, or what we talked about, is that the target we have is 1 month of operating expenses. So we'd like to keep a reserve of 1 month operating expenses, and that would be $3,602,084. So right now, we're projecting that we will be missing that target by the end of the year by about $1 million. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that, within all this legislation, there is also some legislation that says that we would need to keep a 2-month balance. With everything else, there's a caveat. I don't know if that's going to go through, but just so the board knows that there is actually legislation and rulemaking that may up that amount.
So it's not a percentage of what our budget is, it's based on how much we might have per month.
It's 1/12.
Recording in
Which it-
progress.
Be brought to a percentage, but it's basically 1 month of operating.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the things to notice is typically there is a finance committee report. We are still building back up from our reorganization. So that's one reason why there isn't as much of a report from finance as there is typically in the same, I would say, for policy as well.
And Suzanne, go ahead and give a shout out for Bill.
Yeah, if you notice in the Colt report, I've got a section in there about capital, and Bill Ford has been our longtime project manager and clerk of the works, and he's worked on numerous capital projects for us over the last 12 years, starting with the East Montpelier renovation. And he's done things from the HVAC projects, the parking lot project here at U32, the project at Rumney last year, the project at Doty the year before. He's handled all of the boiler projects that we've done to upgrade or replace the boilers in the last few years. And he's just been really instrumental and always had the priorities of the district always come first, and has ensured that we've brought projects in on budget, on time. Been one of the few districts during really intense COVID times where labor was short and materials were short, and we were one of the few districts getting projects done. And so, highlight for him, he's going to retire and focus on his winery. So he's really not retiring. He has a full-time job, but it's a winery, and he's hoping to travel worldwide. So great for him. We're happy for him. We're going to miss him a lot, and we've chosen Andrew LaRosa to replace him as our Clerk of the Works project manager. And we're really excited about what Andrew brings to the table, but wish Bill great luck and super grateful for all that he's done for the district because, and also Bill was a really instrumental part of the capital planning that we did and was a part of the team that developed the plan 5 years ago. Yes, it's 5 years ago that you guys adopted that, so yay for us. But Bill was really big on that, so thank you, Bill.
All right, thank you. If you've never met Bill Ford, he is quite the character. I enjoyed working with him on some of the projects around here. Love the guy.
Before you move on, principals, can I ask? So a question I have is, you mentioned under the human resources that the letters of intent went out, as well as RIFs, reduction in force, and that. What was the number?
Great question, Diane. So we had, so there were reductions in force that were without reassignment. So those were positions that were fully eliminated. And then there were reductions in force where we did some reassignment. So there's a little, and then there were actually a couple of FTE increases. The RIFs without reassignment, we had 13.2 FTE district-wide in which we had reductions in force without reassignment. And so those are positions that will not be in the district in the coming year.
Could I just interrupt? How many individuals does that 13.2 affect? Do we know?
I'm not sure of the exact number.
Okay.
I'm sorry, of actual individuals, because there were some of that did include some partial reductions in force, right? So it's more than 13 people, 13.2 people, because we did have some that were like a 0.2 reduction or a 0.4 reduction, I think, is what we had. So it is slightly more people than that. And then the reductions in force with reassignment, so they were reduced in one location but reassigned to another location or something along those. So what would be a good example of that one? Can you think of?
Now you can use it.
Yeah.
It's the last page.
Yeah, so we were like one full teaching position that might be moved to another school where there was a vacancy available. So that's 5.52. Positions with reassignment. And then we had an increase of 0.8 FTE in the district overall, and 0.4 of that was increasing our pre-K programming to 5 days a week instead of the 4 days a week that we had. So that was that change from 10 to 12 and a half, so that all of the pre-K staff were moved up to 5 days a week. And then we also had a 0.4 nurse position increase. That counts for the 0.8. Gotcha?
So were there any whole positions that were reduced? Like entire positions? Is that what you were saying?
Oh, yeah, there were whole positions that were reduced.
Okay.
And so we had the 4 positions in the middle school.
Yeah.
So one full core of people. We had a business teacher here at U32. We had a Spark Center position. We had a social worker position. Spark Center it's a SEL support for kids. Social worker trying to think of other full positions. Oh, we had a couple of teachers at the elementary level too, and that was mostly due to declining enrollment.
Okay.
Right?
I have a follow-up question on something different, but in the same category, same area where you were talking about the foundation formula translation, and that you had mentioned special education needs and then there's a parenthesis that says, which is currently problematic.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, so right now, the foundation formula is very similar to the way we've talked about how we fund our schools. And we need a community-wide training on how we do that and have a discussion around that. The foundation formula, we used to get a block grant for our special education services, and the new foundation formula that they're proposing includes special education services as part of the allocation per pupil, but it is very poorly defined. It is based upon the student's identified need, and so within a need, you never, like, each of us could have a need in the same category, and one of us need a whole lot more support. And so that's one of the problematic pieces, and it's just not nearly going to be as much funding as was a part of the block grant. Julie, am I hitting all the high points on that? Okay, yeah, so when I say problematic, it's just overall problematic, and we will look forward to them fixing this, but we don't see how they're doing it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the Colt report? All right, moving on to the principal.
Yeah, so the principals are online. I think most of them, I'm not sure if all of them were able to make it, but they're online. So if we have questions around any of the activities of our schools and what they reported, we'd be happy to take those questions.
Chris,
Yep, in the, on page 9.
can you pull the mic a little closer
Yeah,
to you, please?
on page 9 in the section involving the Berlin School, the very last paragraph says, sentence says, once we implement the steps, we will watch the outcome of chronic absenteeism to determine the efficacy of the implementation. Can you explain that a little bit more? And what level of chronic absenteeism do we have at Berlin, and whether that's a situation that applies across the district, elementary, and U32 schools?
Okay, so first, Celia, there you are. All right, great. So Celia, I'm going to let you take that question. Did you hear it?
I
Perfect.
did, thank you. So Chris, really, this is building off of if you remember a few weeks ago, the last principal's report, I talked about that circus hypothesis, and we were trying to make school kind of feel more like the circus. So the work that we've been doing is really looking at connection and belonging. And what I was trying to explain was that we started like a dotocracy, and there's a bunch of steps that we did, but we did this dotocracy. We've made a couple decisions. So the two places that we're going to start as our next steps are going to be having students included in announcements, and we're going to do some like easy welcoming music as students walk in the building. And while those are like low-hanging fruit, we're still going to watch and see if our chronic absenteeism number is moving. I don't have the data right in front of me. I could probably get it to you relatively quickly. But as I explained, the chronic absenteeism rate, we have about a third of our student population who is on track or would be considered chronically absent. And I can't speak to the rest of the district numbers, but what I can say is that utilizing that community schools lens and having Back-Dazan as a part of our SST conversations has allowed us to really think about what are the barriers that are getting, what are the barriers for students that are making it hard for them to come to school. And we're thinking about that in a different way. I guess would be my overall approach, but really that we're going to implement those two next steps, and then we're going to kind of take a peek at the chronic absenteeism, the rates of that group, that about a third of the student population. We have a data tracking mechanism that we're looking at that cohort of students month over month to see if their attendance is improving.
Yeah. And Chris, I would say that I don't have the numbers by school, but that's a report that we can certainly prepare. I know the range. So the range is from 6% chronic absenteeism to 25% chronic absenteeism. And for the year, so it's a proportion of the year right now, but for the year, that's any student. Celia, correct me if I'm wrong, but 18 absences, isn't that our, like, anything for the year? Or,
Yeah, anything beyond 18 absences is considered chronically absent. Essentially, it's 2 absences a month.
yeah, Caroline, I
That's
think,
what I was going to just add in is any student that has 2 absences a month would get flagged as potentially chronic absenteeism. So if we were in October, that would be anybody with 5 days. So yes, but the total year would be 18.
yeah, and Chris, when we discuss my goals, chronic absenteeism is going to be one of the elements of that for us to measure.
And Chris, what I would say is like what the absenteeism data shows is that we know that if students miss 4 days in the month of September, they are something like 5 times, it might be 4 times more likely to be chronically absent by the end of the year. So we really worked hard towards the beginning of the year to really track that number and reach out to families to help and understand right off at the beginning of the year. I think that this would be a plug to really think about. I've heard from the board like a desire to understand more about chronic absenteeism and what the barriers are for our students. So I think it's a great, I know that our district leadership team is really thinking about what that approach looks like from the district level. And it's been really powerful work at Berlin. We have some really cool data stories, like individual vignettes of students who have had barriers removed, and we are seeing like dramatic changes in their absenteeism rates. So it's exciting work, and I'm glad to hear of the board's interest, and I appreciate our district leadership team, my principal colleagues being excited about the work as well.
Lucretia, I do see your hand up, but at this time, we don't have it on our agenda for public comment within it, but it does come at the end. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew we saw your hand. It's just not part of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. I did want to let you know something, just so you're aware. I got into the meeting very late because if you are typing in the information from Zoom without directly clicking on the link, it still says that the host will let you in a little bit. So you may have people that if they typed it in manually, you may have people who are trying to get in.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I do have a question for either Celia or Stephen, whoever may answer it. Does that number for the chronic absenteeism include any sort of, I don't know, like any sort of, this word doesn't sound right to me, but filter, in the sense of like, there are some people who get sick a lot, or people who just have family things going on. Like, does that number reflect that, or does that number is just a base number that we have and we can figure out those numbers later, just from being someone who, at the very beginning of the year, was one of those data points?
So it includes every student who is missing school days when we look at the numbers. We don't want to filter any of it because we want to make sure that we catch students who, like yourself, may be out for a very legitimate reason, but it also means that we need to be looking at how do we support you so that you don't fall behind and you get the supports you need. And so we don't want to filter any kids out of it. We want to make sure that we're seeing that every student who is missing too many days of school is getting some type of support. And for some of our students, it may not be that they need a whole lot, but we just want to make sure that we keep tabs on that.
That's a great question, and Stephen answered that really well. And I would say it's student and familial support, right? When we're really thinking about like community as school and school as community, we want to ensure that that if it's a family issue or dynamic, if it's transportation, if it's food, if it's housing, if it's healthcare, if it's mental health counseling, how are we ensuring that we are connecting that family with the resources so that their student can get to school?
Floor. I have a couple of questions. I wonder if we could sort of share with everybody a little bit more about the student leader presenter for the equity team that met for the part of U32 on the well-being and HJC. Stephen, I don't know if maybe Becca is not here. So if that one is not possible, just to share what the equity team is meeting and how to make more relevant the experience for students? Or Jen, or,
The
yeah,
equity team, yep.
just it's more for the public, yeah.
Okay, so I've been attending the equity team meetings and have been on the planning team meeting, and I think, Flora, let me know if this is what you're asking about. We have been doing some work with our design principles, which are based on the core beliefs of our district and the strategic plan, to operationalize them, help them make sense at U32 for students and staff members. And so right now we're looking at universal experiences and running them through a protocol where we're considering those design principles related to equity and belonging, relevance, community and connection, and student voice. And so we had we call it a retreat. It was really a long meeting with decent snacks that adults in the school system at U32 and students joined to think through some of those universal experiences. So the J term, or the period between semesters when students were engaging in lots of alternative learning experiences. We were also looking at the 8th grade celebration of learning that had started last year that we're building on. And the third one, there's a student service day being planned for our 11th and 12th graders. So we went through a protocol to really make sure that we're doing as much as we can to manifest those core beliefs in the process. And now we're looking at doing something again going forward with some other experiences in school, and hoping to move that to a look at our curriculum as well. So for example, a middle school identity project, but through the lens of those core beliefs.
Thank you. And one last one is, can we share a little bit of supervision and evaluation? Because that's something that always comes up. And I guess it's super exciting to see the notes there for everybody doing reflections and their growth through the year in every school. I'm particularly interested in the ESP evaluation, and if Alicia.
Yeah, so I would say, Caroline, would you like to speak to where we are with supervision evaluation right now?
Sure. So we have sorry, I guess I need clarification. Do you want me to talk about where in the year we are with ESP reflections and teachers, or where we are in the process of our supervision evaluation plan?
No, where we are in the year with actual evaluations of those
Okay, great.
personnel.
Perfect. So yes, April is the month that staff are notified to start thinking about their year, the goals that they set in the beginning, and collect information about evidence for how they met the goal, if it's a goal that they want to continue for the following year. And so Alicia really was inspiring in what she wrote in her principal report, because meeting with ESP staff in April and May really makes it possible to meet also then with all of the educators who tend to do their end of year summary between mid-May and the last day of the last day of the school year for teachers. And so it really is a great time to both give some feedback and hear their self-reflection, how they feel the year has gone, and any support that they may think would be valuable between now and the end of the year.
Alicia, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say ESP are on a slightly different cycle than our teaching staff. They're on an every other year cycle. So every other year they do goal setting, which is what Caroline was just describing. All of our teachers do that each year. Our ESP do that on the alternate years. And then every other year for our ESP, they're on an evaluation cycle. So our and it just depends on when they're hired. But our ESPs, we have rubrics for different categories of our ESP. And it's nice because it's a time for them to get feedback from both us as principals and from the teachers in the classrooms that they work. In our building, I always ask them in early March, give me the names of teachers that you'd like feedback from. And for some, it's the librarian, or for some, it's a special educator. For some, it's classroom teachers. I had 2 of those meetings today, and it makes them feel so valued and so appreciated to get written feedback, not just from me as their evaluator, but from the teachers where they spend most of their time. They look forward to those, and so that happens on an every other year cycle. So not every ESP does goal setting every year. Not every ESP is in the evaluation. But I would say when they do have their evals and have that time with us, it is something that I think we both very much value, because I don't think that they hear often enough, especially from those whose classrooms they're in and out of all the time, how much we do value them.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, Chris?
And this, Stephen, this is for you. On page 11 from the Doty briefing, they talked about how you came out to the community and the community members and the staff and the families were sharing their hopes and dreams for the Doty leadership transition. Just wondering what those folks shared with you and how that's being incorporated into the search.
Thank you. So yeah, I went out and met with the staff, both as a group and individually, made time for them, and then I went out and spoke. I had a few family, parents show up for a conversation. And what I asked is, like, what are some of the traits, what are some of the characteristics that you're looking for in your next principal? I will say that there was nothing shocking in the list. It's kind of that normal, people want a high level of integrity. They want a high level of flexibility. Doty really stressed, because we are looking for a teaching position, that there was some strong instruction as well from that person. So they were really focused in on that. And just making sure that we have somebody who can help provide a consistent and clear roles, given the fact that this is a person who will hold a couple of hats. And so making sure that as a community, they're really focused on making sure that that's clear to everyone. And then with the parents, there were, certainly some things around, like just the styles of communication that they would like to see, some of the community building work that they would like to see in that position as well. And that a really welcoming to the Friends of Doty, volunteers, those kinds of things as well. And I don't want any of this stuff to come across as those weren't being done. That's just what they want to make sure that they have. And so I had a great conversation. It was nice. Yeah.
Celia?
I just want to give a public shout out to Jessie Dahl, our school librarian, who wrote a very competitive CLIF grant. CLIF is the Children's Literacy Foundation. This allows Berlin to be a year of the book school next year, which is super exciting. So look forward to additional events at the school building. Lots of free giveaways for students, authors visits. It's really about cultivating culture and community with a culture and community that loves literacy. So Jessie did an amazing job, and she'll be the grant leader for that. It's a great opportunity for us. And then there's a year, there's like an additional, I think 1,500 or 2,500, I don't remember, next year as a follow-up momentum grant. So kudos to Jessie as a new librarian, and to have a vision for books and learning and literacy in our building. So just shout out to her.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, then moving on to our student report.
Alrighty. Howdy. So, first of all, on April 10th, we entered our final quarter of the year, and next week is our April break, and then we will continue towards the last stretch of the year.
Also, we just want to offer our congratulations to Finn O'Connor, the class of 2008, for performing at the New England Music Festival in Guilford, New Hampshire.
Class of 2028. Sorry. Spring sports have started with the track team having their first meet in the rain, unfortunately, yesterday at CVU High School.
And then in addition, the varsity girls lacrosse team played their first game at 4:30 this afternoon, and both JV and varsity boys lacrosse will play their first game at St. J tomorrow.
The Humanity and Justice Coalition met, and a student leader presented her collaborative work with a U32 teacher on a curriculum reflection and improvement process as well.
The U32 and Craftsbury's rocketry teams joined forces to conduct their first official rocket flights for this year's American Rocketry Challenge competition.
There are multiple upcoming work-based learning opportunities for students, including a UVM Healthcare Career Fair, which I believe happened this week, just happened, Montpelier Youth Conservation Corps, the Green Mountain Work and Learn, and some more programs. Students can inquire further by visiting their counselor or student services.
And then in addition to that, the Youth Community Educator Program is also continuing to accept applications. This is a paid internship for high schoolers to learn leadership skills by helping to run after-school programs for middle and elementary schoolers.
The middle school Stage 16 theater production of Mean Girls, the musical, was performed over the past weekend.
And high school Stage 32 theater production of Julia and Romeo has begun and is planning to have performances starting in late May.
And that's what we have this time.
Questions for our students?
Julia.
Oh, Julia.
I have a quick question. Was the name of the student Finn Connor? Did you say Finn O'Connor?
It was Finn O'Connor, correct?
No, his name is Finn Connor. Just a clarification.
It is? Oh.
Yeah, I know Finn. He's a great musician.
Okay.
Thanks.
Finn Connor, class of 2028.
Thanks.
Maybe O'Connor was 08. Any other questions? Thank you, especially in this busy time of year that you're heading into. So the community schools report was in our packet. Any highlights that you want to make?
I would just highlight one thing. So Catherine just mentioned the student interns. That's part of that program in that report about the student leader designers and building that training curriculum. So that's all the same body of work. And we talked about this as part of a grant that they received here at U32 as part of a community schools work.
I have a question.
Yes, Marty.
So what kind of outcomes are you looking for? How would you know if this is going to be successful? I'm mostly looking at number 2 on the first page there. Like, how would you know that you've successfully met that?
So we're working right now with Central Vermont Medical and some other folks to set some of those parameters. We don't actually have all of our measures yet because we don't know exactly how we're going to do that work. You were at the very beginning of that. And so we've been working with them to look at what kind of services do our students need within the school. And so they're looking at their records right now to say, are there wellness visits? One of the areas that we've identified early is asthma support. So for students who have a regular need for an inhaler or something like that, how do we build a program within the schools to help students with that? So some of the data that we're going to look at is, are students accessing that support? Who's providing that support? Because we're looking to bring in a provider from Central Vermont Medical on a monthly basis to help with some of the wellness visits. And so a lot of that's going to be how well utilized is the program.
So it also mentions families and community members, so that's what I was wondering, how you would measure what you were intending to do and how you would know if you were successful in that.
Yeah, so they're developing some of those measures right now because we're right at the beginning of that work.
Laura?
I think Daniel had his hand before me, but can I just add something to that? I think one of the things that could help, Marty, is that thinking about around community schools also is that we don't enroll just children, we enroll families. So going back to that absenteeism too is like, if the kids are doing well, or if they're getting, whatever it is, it's the supported asthma, or getting that wellness check, it might be that there would be less absent, and we are sort of making sure we are meeting the needs of the community in order for our kids to be learning. Not all community.
Well, that I understood, but I just, after reading that, I was wondering if you were going to be reaching out to families in general or the community in general to try and develop something other than just whether their medical needs are being met at home. But I was just trying to get a better picture of what the
Yeah, and like Steven, I don't know the depths of it. They are just starting to work on it, and I see Celia, so she will be more informed than me.
Yeah, Celia, you were just talking about this today.
I was. I think one of the ways to think about community wellness is both health, but food access, access to mental health services, and the ways in which we've leveraged partnership to ensure that our communities are well cared for. So in that, like with an example, and Beck's not here this evening, but between January of last year when the partnership with Just Basics and the food pantry opened, we've delivered over 600 boxes of food to members of our community. So we know that when families and community members have their basic needs met, that we are in fact supporting all of our learners. We see movement in learning when students have access to that primary level of need. So I think it's both and. It's the community wellness center that Stephen's talking about, as well as bridging barriers of access for families in that way, if that's a helpful frame.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Daniel?
I have sort of a multi-part question, but I was wondering if you could remind us who is on the steering committee for the community schools projects?
Yeah, so the steering committee, when I make it, but I'm on it, Flora's on it, Celia's on it, Beck Dezan, who is our community schools coordinator, Becca Tatishev, who's our principal here at U32, Erica Zimmerman.
But I wasn't able to make it. I had an invite.
And Diane gets invites, but she's working on getting there. She's doing a whole lot right now with all that. Celia, who am I missing? Natasha, I'm sorry, yes.
And Karen Lieberman.
There it is.
And Sean.
Natasha, Karen Lieberman, Jessica Hines. There were some other new faces at the table on Tuesday night as well. Anyone's welcome. There's a meeting in May. There's also a forum that's open on May 1st that to learn more about community schools. And we can share some more information as needed or through Stephen or however we'd like to do that. But
Yeah, I guess sort of the other piece of my question was if we could look at sort of reducing barriers to entry for sort of liaisons to all the elementary schools on that steering committee. And I know that the focus of a lot of the incoming grant dollars is Berlin and U32, but if for instance, the district could make stipends available for a liaison from every elementary school or something like that to participate.
So I heard you ask for volunteers on all that, and I appreciate that. So, but I understand trying to reduce those barriers may be us providing some
a piece of it. Yeah, and yeah, Celia, if you could share those opportunities with the board, that would be great too. Thank you.
Yeah. And Daniel, I think to that point, it's all replicable, right? That's the goal of any of the work, is not to just be in those places, but the goal is very much to build something, like ensure that it's sustainable. And then how do we make that replicable? I know that Becca's working with all of our elementary schools in a variety of ways. From chronic absenteeism to health resources to food, third space programming, all of those things. So she is also one human, which is really hard to ask her to do all of those pieces, as well as the community learning series, all of those things. So we are certainly working as a team and as a leadership group to say, how are we sharing what's working? How is it working? What is each building doing? Some of that is like, we have to figure out what's working and what's not working first. I don't want to be like, do this thing and have it not work out well. So,
Chris?
What is the current source of the community school initiative right now?
Are you talking about the funding source? So we've got, the state is a part of our funding source for that through UVM. So the money kind of moves through them to us. Do you want to know the underlying money that the state gets for it?
What I'm looking for is, and kind of following up on Celia's question on sustainability, whether funding for community school initiatives will eventually come to the board, and then we have to start thinking about that into the future. If there's a grant-based source of funding now, when does it go away? I assume we'll be looking for grants to extend it, but where do we start thinking about, if we are incorporating it into the budget generally, and sustaining this model, which sounds like it's very valuable.
So our community school coordinator position has 1 year left on its grant, and so you would be looking for either more grant funding to continue that position, or that would have to be folded in. Some of the other grants we've talked about, there's one that's a year-long grant, the project track, so that's through next year, and then there's a 3-year grant called the center track. That's the one at Berlin for after school and summer. That's a 3-year grant for us. So if we want to start incorporating some of this work into other schools, that is either going to be through us finding additional grants to do that, or to start building it into our general fund and our general budget.
And what I would add to that, Chris, is that community schools as a framework, capital C, capital S, has, because they are partnered with UVM works as a research fidelity partner. That might not be the right word, but UVM operates as a research partner. So what they are doing is really ensuring they partnered with a group out of New Mexico who did a study on the return of investment on a community schools coordinator to a district. So that is being replicated in Vermont right now. And there's some preliminary findings that were just shared with the House Ed Committee this morning. But there should be more firm numbers by the end. Oh my gosh, it's like COVID all over again. I'm so sorry. But there should be some firmer numbers out of UVM explaining that investment and in the ways in which those systems can be braided. Currently, none of the community schools' money or initiatives or projects are hitting local funds. So it's exciting, the work that UVM's doing to help allow us to be really intentional about funding as we move forward.
Elizabeth?
Thank you for explaining all of that. That's super helpful information. I guess one of my questions is, and I will do more homework for sure, but in regards to the Community Schools Initiative, when we're looking for grants or looking at grants, are we considering ways to kind of spread it across the district? Or I heard you say, Celia, that you're kind of trying it out in one spot and trying to see if it's sustainable and that it works in another spot. One of the things I was really excited about with the Community Schools Initiative was how we were bringing all of the schools together, and I think that that's really, really important. So I'm just curious, when we're looking at grants or looking for grants or funding or things like that, are we thinking about it from a broader spectrum, or are we trying to fine-tune it first? If you could clarify.
Can I take that one, Celia? Are you okay with? So we're doing both, right? So we're really trying to make sure that we do it right the first time so that we can replicate it throughout our schools. And so we're learning with some of these early ones, but we're also exploring the grant opportunities to be able to expand it in the future. And where are the low-cost ways that we can do some of this work, right? So we see the students who are being trained to do after-school programs here at U32. For the initial grant that will help Berlin, we're looking at how does that become more institutionalized so that those students could be doing after-school programs around the district. So if we can figure out how to do it in one place, we know that we can probably replicate it in others. And so what funds do we need to find and what funds do we need to allocate to make that happen?
Can I ask a piggyback question to that? So I heard, Celia, you mentioned that a librarian applied for a grant, which I think is exciting and wonderful. When I think about, funding and the challenges that we have as a district or across Vermont, my curiosity is who in the district is responsible for applying for, searching for grants, or is it really building-based, or is it position-based, or is it district-based?
It tends to be more individual. We do not have a grants coordinator in our system. We do try to coordinate grant applications through Suzanne's office so that we're making sure that we're meeting. And she set forth a set, here's the process by which you go and do that. We really don't encourage our teachers to spend a lot of time trying to get small grants of like $500 or $1,000 because it tends to be more work than the actual pay, or it ends up being more work at the district level. We'd rather just find $500 within our budget and not have to answer to multiple organizations, which is what happens sometimes. But we do support our teachers, usually at the school level. It's done by the principal and the staff there for grants within those schools, like that library grant.
Yeah, I think that's great. I hope that in the future, as we continue to get tighter and tighter with funds, that maybe we can look at a more district-based position. I know there probably was one at some point, or maybe wasn't, but I think we're at a point financially where we've got to have resources put in a place that can get us the resources for us to be able to have resources.
I understand, and I would also say that's directly opposed to increasing the number of staff that are in our district. So it's a push and pull.
I wanted to just bring up, which I don't think I've ever heard mentioned in a board meeting in the 4 or 5 years I've been here. Erica Zimmerman's organization, the Washington Central Friends of Education, because I've heard that organization explained to me by Erica. And also, I'm aware that she has a u32.org email address, and I also have no concept of how the district views her role, because I've heard it sort of described as a grant writer and grant facilitator and pilot program initiator, but I'm wondering if, and maybe this isn't the moment to do it, and we could do a broader conversation. But
I would ask that we do that. So instead of me trying to speak for Erica, be able to bring in, so Daniel's referring to the Washington County Friends of Education, Washington Central Friends of Education, sorry, wrong C on that one. And so they have been a partner with us for decades. Yeah, and so I think it'd be best to bring them in to speak about that so we can ask questions directly, because I don't think I can fully speak to all the work that they do. But that's a great point, and so we'll get that on the steering committee.
But they're separate, just they're separate. They're
Yeah,
not,
we,
they're
they
not
are
even
their
just
own
five.
501c3. We do not,
We do not
like,
pay
we don't
them, we do not-
oversee them.
yeah.
So they're, but
Right.
we work.
And
yes.
also, yeah, there's a way we can support, if there's a role for them to play,
Correct.
as a nimble grant writer or facilitator of these projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Late?
I know that we've been on this topic before, I think, from from a previous meeting about the grants and stuff, but I just wonder, looking down the road, if we want to continue these programs, it seems we're very adamant in that we want to continue with these programs and exploring this way of educating. But how much are the grants worth right now to start the question of how much would we be adding to our already strained budgets if we needed to morph that into the budget in the near future?
Lay, I think that's a great question, and I would actually say that that's a question that has come up out of finance as well, for us to look at all of our grants and how where they're distributed to the schools and all of that. So rather than try to get into each one of those right now, I think it would be best for us to come back with that report, because that was actually a question out of finance this week, is how do we start to show how the funds are distributed, not just grant funds, but general funds and the whole piece is how are we distributing those?
Do we have a sense, though, for this, are you looking for this particular program, Lay, as to what the cost of it is, even from grants?
I was looking just at the total cost of it, and then later down the road, once we talk about potentially needing to morph it into the general fund, how much additional would that be, just because we all know how much our general fund is already strained?
So do we have a sense as to, I mean, it sounds
So I
like,
think that what I would ask, Chris, is that we wait because it's layered. What we just heard was that it's gradually changing. So we know we have 1 year left with the coordinator part of it, then we know there's 2 years left for the other part of it, and then 3 years. So I think that to that point, what are we looking at over the next 5 years for sustainability around that? So I would just ask for it to, instead of piecemealing it, let's have that input from the finance committee.
Can I ask one more thing? I guess another question would be is, then once we start down that road and head towards those reports, are we going to be expecting a report of, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, or are we going to be expecting singular year reports, or are we going to be expecting a report that reflects the growth over a period of time?
So
I can clarify if that sounds right.
Can I just weigh in? I mean, to me, it feels like, yes, it's a moving target, sort of to what you were saying, Diane, and I also think that the activities you engage in when you have a grant with a finite and also generous pool of money are different than the activities you see a high enough impact to build into your operating budget. And so I think, I don't want to throw out any expectations, but I imagine that down the road we'll see recommendations coming from this community schools steering committee on what to retain from this pilot period in terms of permanent operating expenses.
And that's what I would expect too, is that it's really a combination of finance and the community schools working to identify what those parts are. And like you said, what the work is now and what it's morphing into and what's the sustainability. Floor?
I'm wondering when we send this to the finance committee, it's not just that, because it's not just a finance question. I think what the board probably needs is just a presentation of the community schools approach presentation. So just have a presentation and then tie it with with a little bit more information about the specific questions about money. But I think one thing that we should be really proud of is that we're already cohort 2. We are doing this work with both federal and state money, and people are looking at us as an example. It's a big deal. Like we're doing good work. So I think it would be good for the board to understand first what community schools approach is, and then dive into the money for the sustainability. Just a thought.
Any other questions about the community school report?
I'd just like to say, I'd just like to clarify to all, it's like, it's not, I'm not trying to, I don't know, faux pas, like trying to downgrade the thing. It's just concerns that we should have down the road that I sometimes just don't feel like are being reflected in some of these comments. That's just what.
You're that voice of reason reminding us about sustainability in our future, so. Which to me also connects with what Marty was saying about making sure we understand what we expect for outcomes and where we want to work with that. So, and I believe it's there. We just need to have those people come forward.
Suzanne, Diane, what I would add is that it tied into all of the grants are actually academic outcomes for students as well. So part of that after school grant that I think Lay is a concern that I've heard from you is that large grant is that ultimately we believe that when students, and the data shows that when students are met in that way, that you see an increase in academic success. So that's what we're looking for, is ultimately to see our students, our academic scores improving. So it also over time becomes a way that we do school, and it's less about the funding. It's also about the approach and the questions that we're asking in different areas across the district.
So just one follow-up. So is that the type of assessment tool is being developed now to measure those types of outcomes from the community school initiative that you were talking about before in response to Marty's question?
Yeah, some of those are, like, what are the outcomes that we expect as a result of this work? Yes.
How about the academic?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
And that's part of what Ed Quality will talk about as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, let's move on to the Humanity and Justice Coalition report. I know Natasha just joined, so I don't know, Natasha, if you would like to share that great work.
Sure. So this month we were joined by Mela, and she presented to us the work that she's been doing on the curriculum survey that she's been developing. And that the idea behind it is for students to be able to reflect on the curriculum and the content that they're learning and what kind of connection or relevance they see to it, as well as what are some things that they kind of think are missing. And it also allows for the students to actually sit down with the teacher and have conversations about the results of the survey and talk about what kind of changes or new things could be implemented as a result of the feedback that the students gave. So Mela shared a survey that she did with one teacher in particular that she's been working with the idea that she wanted some feedback from the Humanity and Justice Coalition, as well as the students who are involved with the Humanity and Justice Coalition, so that the survey can continue to be tweaked and refined, and also in the hopes that there were some students, other students in the HJC who wanted to partner with other teachers and continue doing this sort of work in other classes. And the students seemed to be really on board with that and asked, as always, some really amazing follow-up questions and gave some really good feedback. And the presentation itself was phenomenal. So we're working on that, and then also we continue to work on trying to ensure that we can get 2 students to help be co-chairs and facilitate the work of the HJC for the remainder of this year and moving into next year. And Diane, I know it was your first meeting with us, so I'd love to hear reflections that you had being able to be a part of that.
It was very impressive. I mean, I joined virtually, so you can't see up close who's talking, and you would have been hard pressed to have picked out who was the adult and who was the students in that room. Very eloquent, very knew what they were looking for, was reflective about, oh, that question didn't quite hit the mark, and even reflecting on the responses that fellow students were making and how to improve on that. And even when there was a little bit of a tension, at least it appeared virtually, they worked through that, they discussed through that, differences of perceptions and perspectives, and it was just very impressive.
Yeah, and I don't know if Jen is in the room with you and if there's anything that she wants to add, but that's what I have for this month.
Yeah, I would just say that work has been going on for quite a while, and I would say a huge shout out to the teacher who piloted. That's Anna Gerritsen, who's been a partner and really does deserve some recognition and some props for doing that. That's a huge undertaking, and there's some vulnerability involved in being one of the first ones. So really, really pleased that Anna was partnering with us in that way and hoping to continue that good work.
Any questions? Then we'll move on to the Central Vermont Career Center. Is there a report?
I can give a slight one. As a relatively new member to that board as well, I've been to 2 meetings thus far, at which point I've been joined the facilities committee as well. A lot of the time, as many know, that is where a lot of the discussions have been residing, is reviewing some of the recent plans and discussing potential avenues about expanding potential spaces in the dialogue there within. Simultaneously, we've been discussing some financial goals within the Career Center specific to staffing and the need for higher demand and potential access to various different programs that are not meeting, I'm trying to paraphrase here. We discussed the program's success or lack therein on potential placement in direct career in Central Vermont at a living wage. That wasn't as fluent as I'd hoped, but that is the report thus far. One side report, we ate banh mi's. We were fed banh mi's by the baking and culinary team, and they were delicious.
Oh, nice. Now everybody's jealous that they didn't join that committee. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Andrew. VSBA report.
Yeah, just gonna add the facilities group meets the smaller facility work group meets tomorrow.
Correct.
5 and 6. I have a very long report from VSBA, but I am not gonna bore you with everything. But I did wanna, sorry, because I thought, yeah, one second. Sorry, I moved it from one side to the other. Isn't it different? I was not ready. Okay, got it up. So the first thing to remind everybody is the new board member academy that is starting the Thursday. I think I've shared it with a couple of people on the board already, but it would be great if everybody signed up for the Thursday, May 7th, and the Tuesday, May 12th. Both are 6 to 7:30. You get this registration on your email update every Tuesday. So just make sure, I've worked with Elizabeth, I think just make sure that you have your password and you're able to get into the VSBA website. There's a little flyer that you got there. As a board, the other thing to remind ourselves was the resolution process, because the resolution is going to start pretty soon, and it would be great to set some time aside for the board if the board wants to submit a resolution, because that's the way, because otherwise we always get into when it's in session, us wanting to bring something over. And I know that there was already a couple of ideas, so just a reminder about that. Then going to H955, I just have 4 little things for us that impact us, more or less, because to go, yeah, I can send you guys the JFO put a great summary of the bill. I'm not going to read that because it would be really long, but what does it mean for Washington Central? One thing to keep in mind is they're moving from, instead of BOCES, to the regional groups, the CSAS that they're calling us, and what does it mean for us is that those shared services for us is, what are those shared services? And I've heard a lot of people asking about that, and they are special education, business operations, and mostly administrative tasks is what they're calling us. The mandatory is just a study committee. There is broad support to do this, and is closer to what the redistricting task force put together, if you guys remember when they put the report. So this is good news for us because it's going to give more data for them to make more better informed decisions. So the criteria that stands the study groups, and this is not completely official, but part of what the bill says is that the study groups is basically they put them together around 2,000 students. It's kind of the minimum, but the timeline for us to work on that is the start meeting will be December 2026 if this legislation happens, and it will be done by 2028. So I'm just giving you like little highlights to keep in mind of how the bill is also moving to regional appraisals instead of towns doing their own property valuations. It will eventually, because it's something that comes up a lot in our talks, it will eventually move to a regional system to make sure everyone is paying their fair share of education tax based on that consistent data that they will get. I'm gonna go into the CSAS is going to be the work that we are going to have to do most rapidly as a board. In Washington Central, could save some money by sharing experiences with our neighbors. We are already in conversations with 2 of our neighbors. The cost of the study committees are going to be given to us, and there's a grant of $50,000 in theory, but there's a lot of this bill that is unfunded mandates, but there is a lot of this bill. So at least for us as a district, this is a bill to support, because we would be way worse if the Senate gets away with their idea. So just to keep in perspective that this really staying closer to what the redistricting task force presented before is way better for us, and it will provide the data so that when they're making this huge decisions and moving, at least they moved the foundation formula now to 2030. And that's helpful because this will also give them some idea. I have some other information on special education, but I'm not going to dive into Julia's part. But that part is really still really stressful for us, because it would mean that we would have to move money really from general education in some ways to be able, and I'm not trying to be drastic, but we would have to move money from our general education in order to serve some of our special education needs. The last thing, so the key dates is July 1st, 2026. It will be the new regional groups. December is when that first meeting has to happen for that merger, and the potential public vote on whatever that happens would be at the end, November 2028. So just keep looking for information. The JFO, like I said, put a really good, and I can send, I'm happy to talk about it. We've been working really closely with them. What the House has put out is really, there's a lot of people that have been working really hard to make that possible, including superintendents, including the NEA, including Vermont School Boards Association. So that's all I have for right now.
Thanks, Flora. I was wondering, I noticed in one of the updates that we received a discussion of the resolutions process having already been kicked off, and I was curious, I need to talk to you about access to their website, because I hit a wall. But I was curious about this board's interest, if it is a board action or whether it's individuals' actions suggesting resolutions. But I was wondering about this board's interest in advocating for some kind of resolution around the early college subject.
So it would have, I think we need to make time in one of our meetings. The resolutions need to be submitted by June 15th to the resolutions committee of VSBA. The resolutions committee, I'm not chairing that this year, is Megan, our vice president, chairs that. And it has to be a resolution of the board. It's not a resolution for an individual school board member. It would be a resolution of the board, so we would have to make time at a board meeting, make a decision, have the language, and submit the language. And then the resolutions committee looks through it, it makes not a recommendation, but studies, and then gets back to the board that proposed the resolution if there's questions. And then it goes to the entire membership in October, at the October meeting is where we vote on the new resolutions.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Flor about VSBA? All right, moving on to the next section, which is the calendar.
Yeah, right. So on page 16 of your packet, this is the proposed school calendar for next year. And there are some slight changes to it from what you have normally seen, but I will say that we have to match up with our Career Center for 175 of these days. So that's where you see a lot of why these days, why this calendar. We all agreed in the region, so the regional superintendents meet to do their calendars. There are some slight variations between us and the other regional members, but we all agreed to start the first day of school on the 26th of August. And so that's kind of that's where we kick off as a group to get that 175 days in with the Career Center. Within the calendar, you'll see one of the biggest changes that we made is in January. We normally had a full day of in-service that was around the Martin Luther King holiday, usually the Tuesday after that. We moved that day to the beginning of the school year as an additional in-service day. Our attendance wasn't as high as that we would hope for that day across that long weekend, and we felt like we would be better served by putting that day at the beginning of the year where we would have all of our staffs together. It does not mean, we have typically used that day for humanity and justice work, which means that we have just got to make sure that our humanity and justice work is built into our regular professional learning on Wednesdays, and that we're really keeping that at the forefront. So I don't want that to be taken as we're not doing that work anymore. We just have to do it in a slightly different way. And we want people to be present. And so that was one of the pieces there. The 15th of January and the 10th of June are both half days for grading. That's contractually obligated time. We also have our conferences in November 6th and in March 26th. Those are also contractually obligated days for us, as well as the flex day in August 21st. So those are all contractually designated for us, as well as the in-service on the 11th of June. And so that's the after the last day of school. So I just also want to point out that the 11th of June is the last school day in this for teachers, which is really as early as we've ever gone. And with a superintendent who has been reluctant to call snow days, we see that as being possible. The last piece I would add in are those the days there in October 21st and February 10th. We've asked for half days there for our teachers to work primarily on data. We have typically found that comes at a time where we can do some data examination and really do some good work. The Ed Quality Committee is the beneficiary of that work that comes out of that time. And so what we're asking is, this is 178 student days in this calendar, and it is 185 teacher days. And so the board actually has to approve the calendar. So if there's any question, well, I guess you'd make a motion, then we'd have questions. I'll leave it to you.
Is there a motion to accept the calendar?
I move to accept the calendar for the 2026-2027 school year.
I'll second.
Patrick, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered.
We have some happy educators in the audience there. Oh, that's good.
The next part is, again, we had just received the results of the board self-evaluation at our meeting a month ago, and so this is just the opportunity to reconnect with it. Ursula, you had the question about the fact that it's showing 20 respondents, 20 board members and 1 student rep. Ashley and I looked through the data, and
I figured it out
Okay.
after a deeper dive. It's that table contains the answers from last year and this year.
Thank you. All right. So if the table, is the table what made these graphs?
I imagine somebody filtered out.
It must have, because this says 16 responses.
Correct. So that was 10 board members, 4 central office, and 2 principals.
Thank you. Good sleuthing there. Any reflections, again, on our work plan? We do have the global focus areas of our board goals around the goals 1 and 2 of our strategic plan are our focus with educational, academic, and emotional outcomes, as well as goal 3, communication and engagement with the community, and then long-term planning were our focus areas of goals. What did people notice about the results of this and thinking around our goals? Floor.
I would say, having spent a lot of time with that data and sort of knowing the board for this past few years, is that so this self-evaluation is not meant to do our goals for the year as of goals of learning, or we would typically do that at a retreat. But what this self-evaluation tells us is, where do we need to work to be better as a board, and growth of us in our learning, of doing better at governance, because we know that governance really affects student outcomes. So I would suggest that we establish 3 or 4, like what I would call mini goals for the board. So one of them, from reading all the comments to me, would be that we need to increase our focus on more data-driven decision, so that they're tied to our strategic plan and where we're going. And I say this because we are going to get into a very complex fiscal reality next year. So that would be, and then, clarifying for us, what is governance versus what is operational roles is another thing. And I know that we are involved with communication with starting professional development for us in May, is what you and Stephen had shared, right? So this could be goals that we could use to, because that's part of the learning that we could use to strengthen, or not strengthen, but to drive that work with Vermont School Boards Association, if Debbie is going to be helping us with our professional development on that. And then, and also strengthen our communication norms and our board culture as a whole. Those are just, because that will help us really have a better relationship with our superintendent and rebuild our trust with our, leadership team and superintendent too. I'm not, when I say rebuild our trust, it's not like we don't have trust. It's just like continue to work together. So those are the 4 things that I was seeing as part of that.
Zach?
I think we need to be honest with ourselves about the fact that some really concerning stuff in here. I think a couple of the, Likert scale questions, and then some of the comments, like the numbers on the question about the board understands the roles and responsibilities of the chair, the full board, and the superintendent, and the board utilizes group norms and has a well-understood chain of communication when issues arise. Both of those were pretty significantly under 50% of respondents being able to say yes to those things. And I think that's really concerning. And I think the comments, sort of paint a much more vivid picture of some of our struggles with prioritizing, with sort of really understanding our lane, with being able to really focus on what's important. I think that there's one comment here that I want to bring out. It's about the amount of time that we spend, focused on the issue about the coach this fall, when we were also needing to deal with some really thorny issues around configuration, and I think we really burned ourselves out. I think we had people who were we had members of the public waiting to speak to and think about the configuration issue for 3 hours, while we addressed something that really probably should not have been our purview at all. And I think we came into some really important discussions and decision points pretty fried, because by that point it was beyond 9 at night. And so I think we need to really look at ourselves, look at how we're using our time, and see what do we need to do so that when we think about, are we really giving people our best thinking and our best judgment, that we're really able to do that.
Any other reflections? Elizabeth?
On a similar note to Zach, a little bit different, I too noticed the areas where there was a significant amount of either neutral or disagree. And I'm curious about the neutral, and I'm not really sure what to do with that information quite yet, but I really feel like understanding board role and leadership role and admin role is critical for us moving forward. I also think that there are differing viewpoints on the board of those roles. And I think we need to really have a significant conversation, maybe in a retreat. I myself have signed up for several trainings to learn more. But I also think that part of why folks seek information is because there isn't always the opportunity to connect with leadership, with admin. And some of the principals have expressed kind of that joy of being able to share their perspective. And I feel similarly that we had a retreat last year, and it was with our admin and leadership group, and it was just wonderful to hear the things they're doing and celebrate the things they're doing and be able to ask, tell me more about that. Not to question what they're doing, but rather to be a cheerleader and to be able to be like, yes, this is it. This is why we're doing it. I really want to always be able to support the leaders in our district because they are the most important people. I also want to be able to understand the whys and also have them be able to give me the whys, So I think for me, a lot of what I'm seeing here is differing perspectives of differing pieces of the evaluation. And so I think one way to do that is to increase communication and really support one another in understanding our roles.
And go ahead, Andrew.
I would like to add on from my perspective to call to talking point. We need to, additionally, I think we need to do a better job of orienting new board members and doing meaningful board trainings. To speak briefly from my perspective for a moment, just the disparate kind of threads I've followed over the last couple meetings, it would perhaps prove beneficial when a new board member is joining in an effort to kind of mitigate some of these concerns. Could we look future state at a calendar where we have a retreat or a version of a retreat this time next year to repurpose roles, to reorient people like myself, to better get on the same page where we can take data like this, look internally, speak internally, and kind of improve upon some of the issues that are raised in these comments, in these data points. The one that struck me as well is, again, the Liz, I believe, calling out, pardon me, anyways, the area where, yeah, the group utilizes group norms and has a well-understood chain of communication when issues arise. From my perspective, in the last 2 meetings, that's been relatively lacking, and it's bred confusion from my perspective, and I heard a lot of confusion from the general community as well, from disparate areas of people seeking truth in some information they pulled from a meeting and running with that, and some people hearing a different truth from that same data. And from my perspective, in the last 2 meetings, humbly, I've been relatively confused on roles in communication, and it feels like at large, I know the community knows this ad nauseum, but the community seems confused as well. And it proves from looking at this data like an opportune time for us to kind of look internally on how to best improve these communications moving forward.
I want to second that. I keep thinking we have to wait until August to finally get together and figure out everything that we're supposed to know. You know, that just seems like a long time.
I like that idea a lot of having an orientation this time of year. I also, to Marty's point, don't hold your breath for August to resolve all the confusion, because it's not gonna. Right, no, I mean, it will be a great dialogue, and it's usually a productive meeting. It's also, just a fraction of the orientation. It's I've got a ways to go in terms of learning about the board, and I'm 4 years in, maybe 5. I guess one thing I wanted to just emphasize, one thing I really appreciated what Elizabeth said, and one thing that her comments made me think about was the fact that, in past years we've read about the role of the board, and that's interesting in an academic kind of way, and I think it can be applied to our circumstances in a lot of cases. And then there are all those exceptions that make those very clear parameters much more complicated. And I think we need to take ownership of that with some kind of, I don't know what it looks like a manifesto of what it means to be on this board and what the considerations and nuances are of staying at the 30,000-foot view, and how does it look to monitor the performance of the superintendent and of the various schools on this board, not just on the platonic ideal of a school board. And I think we need to have the conversations like that more regularly than just August.
Elizabeth, hopefully I say it right in paraphrasing what you said, but one of the things that in your comment about the board having differing viewpoints and differing questions, I think what proves difficult is having a consistent conversation around a single topic. So from my perspective as a superintendent, receiving emails from the board individually, and Diane now seeing those as well, you start to see a wide range of topics that each board member has an interest in. And for us as a whole board to figure out how to take those variety of topics that instead of scattershot kind of trying to address those, is how do we create a plan where we're addressing those big topics on a regular basis and being able to do that. And I think it's a struggle we have because we're a large board, right? So if there were 5 or 7 of us, that would be a very different conversation than there's 15 of us, plus our student reps, right? And so I really think that we're prepared to help try to answer those questions, but we can't answer all the questions all the time. We need to figure out a way for us as a board to work together on setting that plan of here's when we're going to talk about this topic and here's where we're going to dig deeper on this one. And we run out of time. The time is our precious resource. And so we've got to be able to balance, and I think this speaks to Daniel, what you're saying is, what are those norms that we can establish as a board so that we have time for us to have a conversation, we have time to hear from the public, and we have time to gather those questions together so that our leadership team can really address them in a profound way. And I appreciate that.
And some of the work we are going to be doing, with VSBA is, I asked her to do some specific scenarios so that we can really dig into what that looks like. So this does highlight a lot of that. Stephen and I were also talking about those first meetings of the month. If we can really hash out the ability to have that dialogue with both our community and ourselves, of finding that time to do that. So it is definitely things that are there. You had suggested retreats 3 times a year with leadership so that we have a better sense of what leadership, like you were saying, the dialogue. So there are a number of things that are, and you all paid the price of a new chair coming on at the same time as you came on, and so the orientation to that has been delayed in that, so. Floor.
Yeah, and like I shared we had a meeting, Diane, Ursula, and myself, and I'm always there for a backup. And what I suggest is having that orientation. Stephen already did the first orientation at our last board meeting, and then there is that other orientation because we have the booklet there. We said we were setting them with teams. I've been spending a lot of time with David, who was not able to come today, but just doing that board orientation for right now. I think one of the main things I'm maybe the most concerned, and why I was suggesting everybody join the 2 meetings in May 12th, is like, let's not get ourselves caught in the stuff that is really easy, right? Like, and to me, what is the stuff is really easy is open meeting law, right? Like, let's get it. I think our board members need guidance about like sending questions and copying all. We need to prioritize it because email is just for scheduling. It is not for sending questions in advance or sending your opinion in advance. All our conversations, whether we like it or not, this is where they happen at the board. And then going back to what Stephen was saying, is something that we have struggled with the past 4 years, right? Like, is prioritizing. Like, if we're asking question, it has to be sent to the chair and the superintendent, and then look in within the lens of, we have worked so hard in creating systems, right? So let's keep leaning on those systems like the work plan. So we are asking our leadership team to ask questions that is a question of the board and not a question of several individuals, right? I don't know how to better explain it, because it takes a lot of time out of our administrators, and it's not like the questions are not valid, but we can figure out a way to funnel all of those into how they fit into our strategic plan, our work plan, and what we're hearing from the community. But the email part, I'm happy to help with that if there's any guidance needed, or happy to. We're gonna try to update the board work group. There's a couple of things that need to be updated, which I'm happy to help with that too.
Well, just 1 minute. So one of the things too that Steve and I were talking about is that clear identification of a hierarchy of communication too, as to what that looks like. And so that the more explicit we can make things, then the more clear it is. And so that is also what we're working on. There's just a lot that we're engaged in that. Chris?
I would hope that we could develop a mechanism and maybe have a conference with a lawyer about open meeting, but develop a mechanism so that we're not just stuck with raising questions here in the meeting, because you don't have the opportunity then to consider the question that's going to be raised, think about it, and then respond. And it just is not good decision-making, I think, to say, oh, today we're going to decide this question, and we have about 10 minutes to discuss it. But develop a mechanism so that board members with questions can put those questions into some type of forum without violating open meeting law, so that people are aware of what the question may be, research it, and come with resources to discuss it, so that when you have the discussion, it's not a very new, unseen topic. So having that coordinated, rather than wait to the next board meeting, because these things get stretched out, and sometimes we need more timely discussion about things like that. So I would say have, conference with either Bernie or Scott Cameron to come in and discuss the open meeting law aspect of what we can and cannot do through the email, and what would and would not constitute a violation of the open meeting law, but allow us to be more fluid in our communication with each other, too.
Ursula?
So I'm just going to say that in the past, we've talked about this chain of communication, that as a board member, if you have a burning desire for something to be brought up to the board or a question, that you are to direct it to the chair and the superintendent. It would then be brought to the steering committee, and we work on figuring out how to fit it into the work plan. And yes, then documents can be made. You can send documents to the board chair and the superintendent to be shared with the board in the packet so that it's all very public and transparent. That's how we don't violate open meeting law. And we've talked about that several times in my tenure on this board. Usually in March.
So I'm not referring to individual, I prefer communication to go to all the board members, not just to the superintendent, but if there's a question to the superintendent, every board member should be informed of that in a way so that you're not, so everyone, so that's a broad-based discussion. And I would say that everyone should have the opportunity to do that and see what other board members are thinking of, because the steering committee doesn't necessarily share everything. They end up winnowing out what they think is important for the board to know or not know, and it just opens communication, in my view. And so, but I think having an attorney come and say, this is what you can and can't do without violating open meeting law, because that is the, that's the benchmark that we should be driving at.
So as you can see, this is why we end up going round and round, that and those perspectives, and hope and getting better at understanding what those perspectives are. What I also heard from Floor is several trends that were present in here, and as we might direct our work, I would suggest that we bring that to steering committee to flesh out and then send out as part of that. We do know that communication is critical. We do know that understanding of these things and figuring out globally how we all understand the context of what we're working in. And I think that's what keeps shifting for us. And what I also heard you say, Ursula, is our work plan is dynamic and fluid based on what that context and what the work is that needs to be happening. So, Elizabeth, and then Patrick.
I was just thinking out loud about how the communication committee could support the efforts with this. So I don't know how, but just thinking out loud.
I don't wholesale disagree with the conclusions that we've been talking about from this survey, but I do think that a lot of the questions are the results that are in the pie charts are ambiguous compared to given the questions, because there are multiple things in each question. And so, for instance, the board utilizes group norms and has well understood chain of communication when the issue arises. Which one does the person say disagree? Which clause? So I think I'm making a note to myself to be more critical of these questions when we get them in the first place, but next year. But I'd appreciate kind of less ambiguous questions on the self-evaluation in the future.
Can I just say something that I didn't make up the questions? This comes from the governance standards. So are the questions that we have to answer from the governance standards? So those questions, because we're feeling, we can add to those questions. So I'm not saying that you're wrong. Well, I'm saying that because I was trying to make sure that we were fulfilling our job in the governance standards, because we need to meet the governance standards. I wanted to make sure that we were answering those questions.
I'm not pointing the finger at anybody.
No, but I've been just giving you clarity that we're supposed to do this self-evaluation. Those are the questions that came from the Agency of Education. I didn't, so for our self-evaluation, and being the last 2 years, so it has to be reported out like that, so.
But that's what I heard from you.
Yes.
Patrick, is it's about how we're reporting out the data so that it's not ambiguous.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like, we can answer these questions if we're supposed to, but then also answer some good questions.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
I'm wondering if we would stay within the AOE's requirement, if we took those questions and sticking within Patrick's idea of making them separate items, break them out into individual questions. We've still asked what the AOE wanted us to ask, but not in their format.
Yeah.
It's a thought. It stays within the letter of what they want. We are still able to do that. And, you know, that report that we have to do to the AOE on governance standards. And we're getting more meaningful, impactful information, like Patrick pointed out. It'll make for more questions, folks, but maybe
Fill it
they'll
up.
be easier to think about if they're not two different ideas.
Yeah, maybe it won't be as neutral, you know what I mean? Yeah. The things will think. All right, so I'm going to have us move on. This is the next item, which was the reviewing or the discussion around the letter that was received by the Select Board of Calais. I'm just trying to find my my copy of it. All right, so there was a letter received from the Calais Select Board. Elizabeth, you asked to have this on the agenda. Would you mind?
Yeah, so we received this letter, I believe it was today, and I just feel like it's important that we as a board address that we've received it, and if there needs to be further discussion, then we should have that discussion. I'm not sure timing of that, to be honest with you, but I think that the Select Board very clearly articulated some concerns about the plan in regards to pre-K and K movement, as well as the voice of the community. So I do think it is something that needs to be at least discussed.
And so this is the opportunity for people to reflect on what they read and questions they might have. Patrick?
Yeah, I just generally appreciate that the town took the time to do this and reach out to us and send us correspondence. I often wonder when we're talking about important issues on the board, what the town, what our town representatives think. I know it's not, we don't work for them, but they have an ear to the community that is slightly different than our ear, and so it can be instructive. So I just appreciate it so that we got this letter, and would hope that other towns would take this approach as well.
Daniel?
I appreciate what you said, Patrick, and I guess I wanted to add a little bit of context to the letter. We're joined this evening by Barry Bernstein, who's sort of set a little bit of this town action in motion with a resolution at the end of our town meeting that I speak under correction, but that the resolution was that the town select board make the wishes of the town known to the school board, that in fact the town did not want any grades moved, and particularly the pre-K and kindergarten grades. And so the select board invited the Calais representatives of this board to the Calais resident members of this board to, their subsequent select board meeting. I think I was the only one able to go, so I was the one who went and tried to just sort of receive the information and answer any unambiguous clarifying questions that I could. But I think a lot of it is, the select board feeling obliged after that resolution vote at town meeting to pass on that sense of the town to us. I will say, and I think Barry would concede that his resolution was offered in the waning moments of town meeting, and a number of people were not able to hear the goings-on of the meeting at that point, which I think is regrettable, but be that as it may, I do think the voice vote was clearly in favor of the resolution, so.
Any other reflections on it?
Julia has her hand up in line.
Julia?
Diane, I was just wondering if all the board members had had a chance to read that email and that letter that we received, because it was fairly late in the day today. Was it early afternoon? I don't know how many of us have actually read it. I've read it.
That's a good question, Julia.
I didn't.
You did not, Marty?
Nope.
Okay. Did anyone else not have the chance to? And I also want to acknowledge that we have heard repeatedly as a board that some of us need a little extra time around processing and getting a sense of it too. And so.
It's also not posted to the public yet. We did not have it, so we will post that as soon as we can tomorrow, but board correspondence isn't automatically posted, so we will get that since it's been discussed in open session. May I offer something else too? Is that I'm not going to get into the details of agreeing or disagreeing with anything that was said in the letter, but what I would say is I would like for the board to read that letter with an eye towards what does our policy say about what we should do in this situation, right? And so this is where I hope that, I think this is where clarifying for us as an administrative team what the board's wishes are in this kind of situation is one of the most important things we should walk away from in this conversation. Because, and I want to use an example for you, that is not hypothetical. That is, if we make decisions about what we believe should happen at Calais for the students of Calais, we are also, as a board, tacitly making those same decisions for every town in our district, which means that the decisions for us at Doty in Worcester would be substantially similar without policy. Right? So if we have a policy that outlines when and how we make these decisions, what we find important or not important is really the thing that we should walk away from. So if the decision is that students should go to school in their town, which I know that there are districts who have policies around that, that dictates the structure of our schools. But right now our policy is silent on this, right? And we have said through all of that administration is making those decisions, and we did so through the budget process. And so, so I would just say, as you look at this letter as a board, think about what policy can direct our thinking as to how we will address this, because this is not going to be a one-time thing, right? We will constantly bump into this question year over year if we do not, as a board and a community, come to an understanding of what policies should drive it. Are there class size issues that we should be addressing, which we do have some? Are there location issues that we should have? I'm not advocating for it, but school choice is another issue that may come out of this kind of conversation. I just want the board to really focus on the policy piece as opposed to the single decision. Because I want next year to not have this conversation, but instead have a policy that directs us in the way that we should make the decision. I've said my part. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I really appreciate the letter coming to us. And again, it's a letter. It should be part of public comment, not put into our packet. And I know that we're all agreeing. So right now it's part of correspondence today. And I think that letter should be replied by both the chair and the superintendent. Is my understanding. I was not able to be at the last meeting, but I did help with the steering committee on spearheading that. The decision of pre-K has been made and has been shared. And I just want to go back to, like, if we're gonna, and it hasn't been made without the input of their communities. It has not been made without the input of the board. And what we have right now is three 3 hubs for pre-K that is my understanding from reading the past memo and being involved with all of you guys in the work of what the guidance that we gave our administrators is like we wanted to make sure that our pre-K kids have access to library, I'm not going to get into all, but it's I don't know how to explain it, that adheres to all those concepts of a mixed delivery system where our youngest students are going to be able to have the best access to not just our community partners, but are going to have the best access to our special educators, to our OT, to library full-time, to before and after care, and PE. And we already have not us, but our administrators have designed and we have had in function pre-K systems in our district that respond to all of those pre-kindergarten core beliefs that we have and that align to the work that pre-kindergarten recommendations, the work that group did too, and it's specifically. As a state, we already lose kids that go into, that pay for Act 166, not lose kids, that are part of that mixed delivery system, that if we were able to have it in our districts, instead of them going to, and I love Montessori, my kid, when they're going to Montessori, to Waldorf, like if we had all those kids here, maybe we would be able to have even one more hub, but right now we're so lucky what we are proposing with this 3 hubs of pre-K. We are going to be able to serve all our kids, and it's no that much different than what we were doing this year. We have parents that were taking their kids to Berlin and didn't live in Berlin, for example. I know of one of those cases. What is most important is that how do we as a district want to deliver pre-K for our kids, for all of our kids? It's not just on town. So what this letter deserves right now is we received it, we thank them. Where we are right now in the process, the school doesn't work by resolutions from the town. Like they can be advisory, just like we do resolutions in every town meeting that we are sending to the president or to Congress, and they are just, again, advisory information. They can't mandate the school district to do anything different, and I mean that respectfully, very, because I know you. What our obligation is to our students on this district to best serve our pre-K, and I know both you, Diane, and Stephen were really clear when I was listening to audio from that meeting that this decision had been made, and that is the correspondence that should go back to the select board. Thank you.
So there's a little context here involving Calais. And the context was that the board voted that they would not move students if this town voted to keep their school. Not move students as a way of subverting and not honoring that vote. And this decision was publicized like the day after that vote. And so there's more context here than meets the eye. The other aspect of it, and I know Stephen talked about this at that meeting, saying that he had the authority to, move students if necessary. But then you have the context too of there are more Calais pre-K students than East Montpelier pre-K students, and there's a wholesale move of the Calais kids to East Montpelier as opposed to moving the East Montpelier kids to Calais. And as I understood from our last board meeting, that the services would be substantially the same at either location. So then we're left with the context of, okay, why the move? Why the move in the direction to East Montpelier as opposed to move to Calais? And so it's not as simple a question for community members, I think, has been presented. And in terms of there not being a policy, we should define that in terms of where that decision lies, whether it's with the board or whether it's with the superintendent, or whether it's a combined joint decision. And we'll have a discussion about that, I think. And I think Julia made a point here saying the statute doesn't necessarily support that it's a superintendent decision, and a lot of decisions are made by default. There's a power vacuum and then someone steps in and makes the decision. So it's more complicated than that. It's worthy of a decision, of a discussion. And I would say that we should invite the Cal Select Board members to come and speak with us at our next meeting. Have a slot. If they don't show up, then that's on them. But if they do, then we have a further discussion about this. It's not, by brushing it under the rug a little bit, it doesn't go away. There are hard feelings, I think, for East Montpelier residents. They were pretty vocal at our last meeting and had emotionally charged responses, I think, to some of this discussion, as did the Calais folks. So I think it's best if we at least send the invitation to the Cal Select Board to come in and give us some history about the origin of the letter. I'm not doubting Daniel's history at all, but give them the opportunity to come in.
So Zach and then Julia.
So I think, last meeting was just a week ago. Chris, I think it's worth recognizing that meeting, you also recognize that when we had the discussion in December about not subverting a town's vote, that was about the question of coming very, very close to closing a school. You're leaving just one grade open, and that we had, you, Daniel, and I all spoke to the fact that we had, that in that discussion, we had been, that we had talked about the fact that we weren't precluding any movement of students. So I think we need to recognize that. I think we also need to recognize that we all represent all of the constituents of our community, and that we need to take that really seriously. And I think that what you saw in the last meeting was East Montpelier residents starting to recognize that this board has a history of responding to whoever yells at them. And so they've learned to yell. And I think we are in for a really rough road if we keep reinforcing that the way to get this board to do what you want is to yell. It's going to get a whole lot louder. I also think, I remember Jared sent us a letter before the last board meeting, asking us to exercise leadership and try to turn the temperature down. And I had a constituent say, watch out, just buckling under for who's yelling now isn't going to turn the temperature down. It's just going to make a new group of people mad at you. And I think we need to recognize that potentially enforcing, showing that the incentives are that whoever yells loudest will get their way is just going to keep turning the temperature up. And that exercising some leadership here means saying, we need to exercise our judgment. I was thinking about whether I wanted to use this during reflection or earlier in the meeting. I think now's the time for it. Think about what our role is as a board. This is a speech that I read at my first class of ethics in grad school. It's Edmund Burke's speech to the electors of Bristol. This speech was given in 1774, when all the electors would have been men, all the members of parliament would have been men, and so I just want to recognize there's some language here that is not how we would necessarily speak today. But I do want to give it in the original and not change any of the language. Certainly, gentlemen, it ought to be the happiness and glory of a representative to live in the strictest union, the closest correspondence, and the most unreserved communication with his constituents. Their wishes ought to have great weight with him, their opinion high respect, their business unremitted attention. It is his duty to sacrifice his repose, his pleasures, his satisfactions to theirs, and above all, ever and in all cases, to prefer their interest to his own. But his unbiased opinion, his mature judgment, his enlightened conscience, he ought not to sacrifice to you, or to any man, or to any set of men living. I'm going to skip a couple of sentences. Your representative owes you not his industry only, but his judgment. And he betrays, instead of serving you, if he sacrifices it to your opinion. I think this is a case where we need to exercise judgment, where we need to recognize that we've we've talked to the professionals in our schools about what it means to have a kindergarten of 5 or 6 students. That we have seen over the course of the last few years as we have cut positions or asked people to split themselves between schools, that we have lost really good staff and that we're at real risk. And that we need to think about what it means to exercise judgment and leadership in this case. Thanks.
Julia?
I had to unmute myself. It's okay to change our mind. If we have information in front of us that suggests changing our mind is in the best interests of our students. And I know that in bringing up the issue of discussing the letter that we got from the select board, we probably didn't mean to get into a big debate about it right now, since not all of us have read the letter. So I wonder, Diane, if it might make sense for us to postpone this discussion and put it on the agenda for the next time. And I guess I want to ask the question just straight out. Is it okay for us to change our mind if we as a board have discussion about this and think that that change in decision about the placement of pre-K students is warranted? Sorry.
So what I'm going to say is that it's not about changing our mind. I think it is about respecting how we make decisions. And the change of mind would be for the administrators if they suddenly, during the summer, they suddenly had 10 more preschoolers registered. They would probably say, oh, maybe then we need to run another program I'm just making this up, in Romney, because we're just running a morning program there. Maybe we need to do an afternoon. That's not for me as a board member to decide. We have given them the parameters with enough input from us. The select board has no education. We are 2 separate municipalities. We get their feedback, we hear them. This is past when we have made the decision as a board, and they do not have the educational oversight of our school district, right? We have the educational oversight of our school district. We have given guidance to our administrators. This is what they are telling us that is the best way to serve our pre-K students with the information they have right now. What our communities do deserve is to have a board that is strong enough to stand behind the back of our superintendent and our teachers, administrators. They've been telling us, they've been sending us letters. They were really happy from the feedback that I heard. Again, I was not at the last meeting, that from the early on, it was explained the decision had been made, and then there was clarity of how the decision was made. They were able to visit the class. So what we need is to be strong as a board and hold the back of our administrators and bring some closure to our communities, to our and to our leaders. We're both staffs, as we heard from the different letters, we're hurting. There's a lot of heartache that is going on right now because we're not willing to understand that, yes, sometimes, and part of what Zach was reading, I was elected to this board to serve all our students, and our decisions are on behalf of all our students, and sometimes people are going to be upset at you, and it's part of the job. We're here for all our students. That's the bottom line. So I would just say that this is not just as process. The letter needs to be responded by the chair and the superintendent. The decision has been made.
With all due respect, Flor, my question was for the chair.
I was speaking to the chair too.
Repeat your question again, Julia.
My question was, is it possible for us to change our mind about the placement of pre-K students if we believe, after revisiting this situation in light of the correspondence we've received that
And
it's in
again,
the best interest of our students. That's my
I
point.
would, right, I would state what I said at the last meeting, which is, the decision was made. To me, the context has changed, the understanding has changed. I am not 100% clear what our role as this type of a board is in these types of decisions. So what one's perception of the role and the decision-making can be looked at, just like when we look at our core values, how I interpret the core values around transparency, community engagement may sound very different to how another board member does it. So I will be very open that I am struggling with it because I am being told why I'm making these decisions without my feeling of I'm not being heard. I'm being judged as to why and being second guessed as to why I might allow other voices at the table. So to me, this is work that we need to clearly better define for ourselves, which we have identified, and what is actually on our next meeting for us to have that scenario and that work around better defining what our roles are so that we can ask that question. But when this happens, what is our role in that? And so that's where I'm at, to answer you very truthfully. Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a couple points. One is, I'm only one opinion. I think that the select board had a lot of ambivalence around this topic, and I think they view their role here as a messenger. It was the town acting as a legislative body on town meeting day that moved this forward. And I think the select board understands that they don't have a role to play beyond communicating this to us and communicating the will of the town. I also think that this letter, well, we were copied on it and a cover letter was addressed to us. The letter is addressed to Stephen. I think the response should be from Stephen. I think the response should be to refer the town to our last meeting where we had a really, really productive conversation about the very complicated dynamics around our pre-K program and why we landed where we landed. And the fact that there are trade-offs is something that I think to some degree this board appreciates, but really no one appreciates except to the degree that the manager of our district understands and appreciates. The trade-offs, the costs of spreading pre-K resources across 5 schools are diffuse. And so it's harder for people directly affected by the costs of consolidating them into 3 sites. It's harder for them to see those diffuse costs, but those diffuse costs are significantly greater than the costs of not doing that. And I think we need to move on in our conversation here.
I would like to second Julia's suggestion that we put this on the agenda for next time and that we have a deeper conversation about it. I mean, I'm new on the board and coming at this and just looking at it. At the last meeting, it was sort of disappointing to hear so many staff giving anecdotes about why the move was so good, when I've seen data that would be in opposition to making this move. So I think the situation has changed. We have both Doty and Calais as schools that are open. We have a number, I think a number of students at Calais that exceeds the number of students that are at East Montpelier. And it just does not seem to be equitable. It does not seem to be just. And I think it's really important to revisit this in a determined way based on data.
So it lends itself, what I will do is work with Debbie from VSBA, who is doing our PD around governance and our roles. And to me, we can have a conversation with her around why use generic scenarios, here's an actual one. And so around that guidance and that clarity from an external party as we work through this. It's on our agenda for that May 7th, May 6th, May 5th? The first Wednesday in May. So that then we can specifically go into that. And I would say we'll move on. We will take is a 5-minute break? Okay. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Patrick, the board orders, please.
Is this a motion? I can't remember.
Yes.
Good.
And you just read the total amount at the bottom.
Move to approve the board orders totaling $895,216.05.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. We have on here future board items. I'll list the ones that I've heard, and that means we'll be meeting for a while. So from last week, there was funding differences in pre-K, looking at equity across the district. There was also criteria, parameter, Lisa, I'll get these to you, so criteria / parameters of how we decide to move students between schools. I also heard a request about technology in schools, also carrying over voluntary merger conversations. Tonight I heard about the Washington Central Friends of Callis, right? Friends of Education having a discussion. VSBA resolutions as well on there. And then, again, also finalizing of the board, taking a look at board goals.
Also discussion about community schools and
Yes.
funding into the future.
Yes, thank you. Anything else, Ursula?
It was brought up at the new board orientation.
Yeah.
The only other thing was the Career Center has asked to re-engage, and I lack historical context here, of course, but with proposals of a building on U32 and or Twinfield. I don't, again, lacking context, I'm just a messenger here.
Anything else, Daniel?
Yeah, it was just, I've been on my own brainstorming ideas and subjects for community forum topics, and I was wondering if there's some way to include a dialogue between the full board and the steering committee and the chair as we develop sort of an agenda for those community fora. And I know that time is precious, but it seems appropriate for the board to weigh in on what their priorities are, and so I don't know if the steering committee can negotiate or navigate that.
And I would say absolutely. The one reason I would say that I was putting things forward was just because of seeing whether or not this is a match of a format. And so, the first couple, just kind of, thinking that way and working with Stephen around that. But definitely, it makes a lot more sense for that.
Great, thanks.
I was gonna say, I believe that's also been a discussion at our retreat when we're talking about our work plan.
Yeah.
Because it comes up in our work plan, and that's the time when all of us can have a conversation about it.
Yes.
So just for new board members, then maybe you could provide some clarity of what happens with the future agenda items, how they go to the steering committee, and we would have to look at them within the context of our work plan and having them make sure that you guys know what the work plan is, so you can click that link, and I know that it was part of this folder that's actually created for us, but, and just understand that at our next meeting too, we're gonna have a big meeting, a lot of information from equality too.
Not yet.
Not the forum, but the
No,
third of the month, yeah.
will there be a presentation at the next, on the,
I think the third Wednesday of May, we're gonna have a board meet, like, we're gonna have a presentation to the board from Ed Quality, and in theory, the schedule says our June third Wednesday, but that is when it might have to be.
Right. So yes, so that is the standard procedure, is that all of these ideas don't just get plugged in. They go to the steering committee to discuss and figure out in the work plan, and that. And we have looked at the work plan. There is also those different parts of plugging in that's already in, and that, and also the framework for the business parts of it, which is all the reports, all of the, if there's motions that are coming from the different committees, the framework is there and the specifics get played out. Chris, did you have a
I
question?
did have a question that if going through the steering committee process, if certain proposed future agenda items are not going to be put forward, that we, as a board, hear that they're not going to be, and why?
Yes,
Okay.
because that has come up, because they'll either hang out under that future
Yep.
agenda or not, as Patrick pointed out to us a few times. So, so that was the list of 20 future items, agenda items and that. Board reflections?
I think another.
Natasha has her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Natasha?
Oh, Natasha, sorry.
Yeah, I would think, just in the vein of the conversation we had around how we communicate on the board, that we be really deliberate and thoughtful about how we frame our comments, because I think sometimes comments are made that are generalized and imply that board members are not competent enough to make informed decisions and are only able to make decisions based on emotion, or being yelled at by community members. I find that incredibly insulting. So I just, I know when I make comments, I try to be very thoughtful and try to use I statements. I'm sure I don't always manage to do that every single time. But I just wanted to put that out there, that if we do want to work towards being able to communicate with each other and in a way that allows for civil discourse, we should be really thoughtful and deliberate about how we frame our comments regarding the board as a whole.
Thank you. Other reflections?
I was going to also comment on our discussion, and I appreciate it. I can understand, Natasha, I hear what you're saying, but I also think it's good when we have vigorous discussion with each other. I don't think we go over the edge to insulting each other, but we can have vigorous discussion, and that's what we should be having. And I thought we did tonight, so I appreciate that. Thanks.
Floor?
It's not really a reflection, but Meg left this here for us in case you guys missed it. The books are being, it's an invitation if you want to take a book. Please write your name here. Some people had signed already for it, and it's what does it mean to adapt to a changing world is the name of the book. It's going to be Thursday, April 30th at the U32 Library. It's a community potluck, and this book will be discussed in
The Light Pirate, I believe.
yeah, the light pirate. And some of us, they had sent an invitation to all of us, not everybody replied, but she wanted to include the board members. There's some books there. If you want to take a book, just please, there's no strings attached, but please put your email here, as Meg said, and if you want to participate. There's more information in this QR code too, so that's it.
Thank you. Any other reflections? All right, we will move into public comments. Oh, no. And please do raise your hand so that I can estimate the amount of time needed. And Lucretia, I didn't know if you wanted to comment now. You had your hand up earlier, or if your hand was up, just to let us know about the difficulty getting onto the meeting. So.
No, thank you. I actually did have a comment, but I did think it was important to let you know about the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so if you want to raise your hand, then I can calculate.
Let me just figure out, there we go.
Suzanne, is your hand up as well?
Yeah, my
Okay.
hand's up.
Okay, I just want to count. So that's 3. So given we have 9 and given the timing of this, we will go to 1.5 minutes. So, so what I'll do is I'll start with Maya, then I'll go to Barry. So go ahead, Maya.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, good evening. So I'm Maya Stone, I live in East Montpelier. And the board has talked a lot lately about the need for trust. But I believe that trust is being eroded because priorities seem to be shifting away from the classroom. It feels like the board is putting the general community input, often from people who don't even have children in the district, ahead of the need for a rigorous education and a well-resourced care. When you prioritize the preferences of those outside the classroom over the academic outcomes of those inside it, in all the buildings in our district, you aren't building community, you're failing your primary stakeholders, which is the students. Public input is important, but it should never come at the expense of educational excellence. We cannot have trust in a process where academic standards take a backseat to local politics. If you want the community's trust, show us that your first and foremost loyalty is to the students and their academic future. Tonight, hearing board members consider chipping away further at our access to full-day childcare with well-resourced care is very upsetting. I also want to be clear that the data that some community members have been citing is not reflective of our community. We are not neighborhood schools. We are rural schools. I also want us to consider who is being affected by cutting access to childcare, full-day childcare, in the context of a historical exodus of mothers from the workplace. Please do not exasperate this growing gender inequity. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Barry?
Well, I like the music, that's good. First I wanted to...
I don't know if it's on.
Is this on?
Mm-mm. Press the bottom. I think you have to press the bottom, see if that works.
Oh, okay, we're going to start from now. Diane, I wanted to thank you for your effort at the last meeting to engage in a different process and more open communications with the community. It was definitely appreciated by a lot of people. Secondly, just for history, if people would read the articles of agreement, this district's responsibility is pre-K to 6th grade. Totally support daycare, but it's not in the responsibility of this district. And for people from East Montpelier who talk, almost going to be finished here, the Articles of Agreement, there are 3 members per town, wasn't by population. Every school has a right to reject having their school closed. It wasn't just Calais or Doty. And all of the debt was shared by all of us, including the $8 million from East Montpelier when they did the renovation, and Berlin's renovation, and Middlesex. I point out one last thing before I lose my last. Before the consolidation vote, when Calais voted, Chairwoman Floor said, we may have to move, if we're going to move the 1st through 6th, we will keep the pre-K at Calais. We're considering that. That's completely contrary. Yes, you did say that, Floor. And the other thing, I will just say, I was surprised at Stephen's presentation that we didn't hear from the chair of the principal of Calais. And I also, there are rumors in town that teachers have been ordered not to speak publicly. I'm just saying the rumors because I haven't heard it directly, by the superintendent. These are members of our community, and I think it's completely contrary to what we're trying to do. The last thing I will say is on leadership. In nearly 60 years, I've been in leadership positions in very technical fields and nonprofits in Europe and in the United States, and a good leader can change their minds. Someone who, just take a look at what's going on with our president. If you get locked into not being willing to change your mind, you've lost your leadership quality and potential. Thanks.
So whatever rumor you're speaking to is not true. We've never silenced any teacher within our district. In fact, our policies protect our teachers and staff, and they're able to speak to this board without retribution. And so that is an untrue statement.
Okay. 100%. Good to clarify.
We will go to Callie, and then we'll come back here.
Hi, my name is Callie Weller. I'm a parent of a kid at UPC. I'm a taxpayer of Calais and a teacher in the district. And I'm just here to ask the board to be continually aware of the changing preschool enrollment numbers, because they do continually change. They are increasing by the day. And I ask you to be aware of this because in the past, we have never added a preschool because of numbers increasing. We have added kids to wait lists. And I'm concerned that if we have too many kids for what we are going to offer, and we put families on wait lists, we are encouraging families to go elsewhere, and that is not, I believe, what the board would want, is to encourage families to go outside of our towns to seek preschool. Also be aware that classrooms, every classroom that is allotted for preschool has a capacity per square feet. So if we fill a room per square feet for how many kids can be there, we can't allow more children in that room. So there's just a lot of pieces to this puzzle that I think people need to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Cindy?
Cindy Gardner-Morse. No. Cindy Gardner-Morse from Calais. Is that all right?
Yeah, push the bottom.
I did. Hello, Cindy Gardner-Morse from Calais. Oh, that's on there. I just wanted to say that at the meeting last week, some people justified keeping staff in a familiar location because moving people is disruptive. If it's disruptive for adults who have experience with doing that, I just want to make us aware of what it must be like to be a small child. I have two questions. Please explain any benefit to Calais Pre-K and K students in being transported to East Montpelier, and consider bringing the East Montpelier children over to Calais. I haven't heard much discussion about that, which doesn't feel good to people who live in Calais. I also wanted to say, where's the child in this discussion? I'd like to see more data and research driven rather than anecdotal commentary. And if there are benefits to students being moved, then let's hear the benefits, not anecdotes. Thank you.
Griffin?
Hi, I'm a parent in East Montpelier with students in pre-K and kindergarten in East Montpelier. I'd like to say that I understand the arguments on both sides. I think equity and justice is important. And I think transparency is important. And I think part of transparency is making a decision and sticking to it. And I understand people's concerns about losing a pre-K or a kindergarten in one location or another. And I would understand if we had to shift pre-K or kindergarten from East Montpelier to Calais. I would just say that it's not time to make that decision for the next school year. at this point. I think it erodes trust and transparency in the board to just a week ago say that a decision has been made, and this week to immediately relitigate that position. So I just for one want to say I understand everyone's concerns because I have them myself for my children. And then the last piece is that equity and justice is important. We've heard a lot of people from Calais talk about how it's not fair to have more pre-K children signed up than in East Montpelier, but they're also not mentioning that no one in East Montpelier got a vote to keep their school open or close their school. So there's lots of things that aren't necessarily equitable, and we need to pay attention, I think, to just what's best for the students long term. And I think we need to have the board make decisions and stick to them, the best decisions for the students. Thanks.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I want to make sure the public speaks first.
David?
Hi, sorry. I'm David. I'm a parent in the district. And I work at the Family Center at Washington County as a family support worker. And I just wanted to voice my excitement and support for the community schools program that's being piloted at BES. As a person who works to support families with kids before kindergarten, I often see families go into having school-age kids without the supports that they need in place, and anything that can strengthen those supports coming from schools, I think would be great for not only Berlin, but our entire district and all the neighboring ones as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Lucretia?
Thank you. I have a question, but before I ask that question, I think it's important to remember that should there be changes to decisions that have been made, I think it's important to remember that enrollment numbers definitely should have, an impact on the decisions that are made, and enrollment numbers are not finalized throughout the entire year. So I don't think it's, trying to erode the power of the school board or the power of the administration to make decisions to change things based upon things that, that information that comes in, like enrollment numbers. But I think it's important to recognize that those things change. And so to me, it seems, it's very difficult to understand how, you have to make a decision and be firm on it when all of the information is not in. But that's just a comment. Here's the question. Is it accurate to say, because I'm still trying to understand all of this and really grasp the whole, situation, but is it accurate to say that keeping the staff at Calais as it is will not cost the taxpayers, the district, any additional money? Is that accurate?
No.
Next year, if we were to keep it the same, does it cost the district more money? If we were to keep it as it is, keep our pre-K there, does it cost the district more money?
If we continue to have a pre-K program at East Montpelier as well, then yes, it would cost us money.
Okay, and so then I think the problem lies for everyone, and probably not only just, the community, which I am part of in Calais, to understand is that when you discuss, busing students from one school to another, it's really difficult to understand busing a larger group to another school. It's really difficult to understand. And I think that's where a lot of the problem comes in. We just don't understand that. I certainly don't understand that.
Thank you, Lucretia. Emily?
Thank you. I'm Emily. I'm a parent in the district. It seems there's still board members who don't realize that the contingency plan always called for pre-K and K to be located at EMES from Calais. This was not a decision made after the vote. When you consider changing the decision, realize again you're considering bowing to the demands of just a few. I know many families in Calais are excited to be at EMES. These feelings of location and pre-K being at EMES are the negative feelings are not unanimous across even Calais, and it's important for you to realize this. One Calais resident forced the Calais Select Board to write that letter. He single-handedly is using the voice of the Select Board to advance his agenda in this situation. It's important for you to realize that appeasing to the demands of a few families would mean hurting many more families across the district. Pulling more funds to Calais takes away from the other schools and kids. This is not equitable either. We heard last week that the logistics of having pre-K at both EMES and Calais would not work effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Suzanne?
There's just a lot here, and one of the things that I feel like I want to point out is that there was a budget process and a timeline. And as your business administrator, I continue to get a feeling of the process is being eroded by the public coming to the board and the board wanting to make changes late in the game after the process has been completed. And as your administrator, I want to follow that process. I want to follow that timeline. I want to get you the information when it's needed, when it's requested, when it's part of that calendar. And you make those conversations, you have those committees, you had a configuration committee, you had a preschool committee, you had timelines. We used all of that to advise the budget, and we went through the whole process. And the select board could have come at any point and commented on that process and commented on the budget, and they did not. I worked for a municipality at one point in my life. I can't imagine that they would love it if we went to them and started talking to them about their budget at this point in time, because it's already done. And then a reflection on the board's evaluation. Board members asking questions as individuals becomes particularly problematic for us to respond. And it would be great if the board could continue to speak as one body instead of individuals. And if the board continues to respond to community after the budget has been completed and voted on and moved on, where does it stop? Like where else could they not come to you and say, rehire those 4 teachers at U32? They've already come to you about one of the proposals during the budget process. This proposal, where does it stop? Where can we continue to move the ball forward as administrators?
Thank you, Suzanne. Sam, I see that you have raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. So I just tuned into the meeting, so I'm sorry if this was addressed earlier, but I just have 2 quick points. One is that I want the board to, strongly consider the decision to move. So I'm a Calais parent. I want the board to strongly consider that the decision to move the the pre-K and the K to East Montpelier, which was done before the vote, was done with the thought in mind of what funds were freed up for other programs in Calais. And if those programs get moved back to Calais, what programs will be cost? What programs will be cut? And what is the cost going to be to all of the kids at Calais? And what's that cost going to be to all the other kids in the district who will be impacted by those funds suddenly being needed in Calais? And my second point goes more broadly to the decision-making process of the board, which is that if the board asks and empowers decision makers in the district and the administration to make unpopular decisions, and then every time an unpopular decision is made, tries to take that power away from those decision makers, it greatly destabilizes the district, and it makes it impossible for people to make unpopular decisions which sometimes need to be made. So I'd strongly urge the board to hold fast and not destabilize the district and decision makers in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I'm not seeing any other hands, and so we will close public comment. And we do have, next we have an executive session, and I know that it was passed to you, Chris, to make the motion.
Move that we go into executive session for a student matter
Student residence.
and invite Superintendent Stephen to join with us.
Is there a second?
I'll second going into executive session for a student residency with our superintendent there.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Sounds good.
So Julia, and is Natasha still on? Okay, so you all, I think, sign out of this meeting, and I don't, Flora, would you help with that? Thank you. Lisa,
Lisa, you can go ahead, send it to me. Okay. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to accept the, hey, I'm making a motion to accept the recommendation for the residency request
Second.
from our administrators.
okay, so.
Second. Oops, sorry, Andrew. You can have it if you want.
Seconded.
Okay.
Hang on one second, please.
Oh, Julia.
Julia is not back in.
Okay.
There we go.
Operating.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded for us to accept the recommendation for residency requests, administration's recommendation for student residency requests. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so now we have another session.
I move that we go into executive session for personnel matter. Is that right?
For superintendent evaluation.
Superintendent's evaluation.
Superintendent evaluation, and are we inviting the superintendent?
Yes, we would.
What?
I have a point of order. Just to be clear, is there ever a period where parents and community members get to weigh in on the evaluation?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a climate survey that we utilize.
Okay.
So Chris has moved,
Second.
second by Elizabeth. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll go back in.
There'll be no action.
There's no, yeah.
Or will